All right. So it's coming up to November, and I will be doing a Movember campaign. And to just get some interest out there, last year for Movember, John Lee from Austin, Texas, John Lee Books, did a talk on from hero to elder. I think he's now phrasing it as the Odyssey of aging. And this was something I just didn't get loaded up to YouTube. So it was an event that we had here in the room behind me with a whole bunch of men and some guys online, and just John sharing about his emerging thoughts as a man who's in that stage of life. And I'm part of a few groups that are in that phase themselves, where I'm 61 now and wanting to finish strong. And so here's John Lee speaking really from the heart about this the odyssey of aging from hero to elder. And you look out for this Movember. I will be running another event with John, another year on with him, as he's putting this book together and his ideas. Just another opportunity to join us online, and there'll be other events that will be coming up that I'll announce in another video. So here's John Lee live from Austin, Texas in 2024 for Movember.
So, John, I will just say, look, thank you for doing this chat today because I've just started the recording. So, this will be some of what people hear. And I know today it's over to you to talk about hero to elder. So, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. So, I should have called this talk. I put out a little poetry book a couple of months ago called "I Thought Getting Old Would Take Longer." You know. And so this is my first poem in the book, and it was written when I was in Australia. So I was going through collecting all these poems to put in this book, and this is one that's the first poem in the book. It's called Almost Handsome. Tell me, what is it like to be young and beautiful and live in Australia? Oh, it's all right, I guess. No big deal, she said. What if I told you I was young once and almost handsome in Austin, Texas? You might not believe me. The Buddhists and the Hindus hold out the hope that I might be again one day. Either way, may I suggest, be young or old and beautiful in Australia or Austin as fully as you possibly can, because if the Baptists are right, this is it. Okay, that went over like a lead balloon. I'll read you this other one here. This one is devoted to, I think Peter said it, called Winter. So much has come and gone, leaving me like a scarecrow in the garden of age. I know I'm at the beginning of my winter of consent, to be quieter, more solitary, and somehow more forgiving of my former heroic self, while increasing my patience with others. Now I am trying to find my own way into the snow-filled forest of elderhood. So I've been working on this stuff personally, moving from hero to elder, for about 2 or 3 years. And over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a number of men and a few women who kept asking me the question, where are the elders? Where are the elders? And the answer I had to give is, I don't know. I don't know where they are. Because in our culture, and to some degree, y'all's are the same, we are a youth-driven society who shuttle our elders, our old, aging people away, and we do not, quote, respect our aging people. And one of the reasons why we don't respect our aging people in this country is because aging people don't want to become elders. They want to do what? Stay young. Stay young. stay young, right? And then what I realized was in the first 40 years, what I was doing, maybe in the first 50 years really, was being like a hero. You know, in my family of origin, in my biological family, I was designated the hero child. Anybody in the group, did you get that designation somewhat to be the hero of the family?
Yeah, sure
Raise
did,
your,
John. Yeah.
raise your hands if you did. I want to see
Yeah.
if anybody else did. Yeah, yeah. So I was set up really well to go on the hero's journey. That's what I want to just introduce for real quick, because probably most of you know this. Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell is the one who articulated and wrote about the hero's journey. And one of the things, well, let me just give you his very short synopsis of the hero's journey. There's a person, male or female, that gets a call to do something special, spectacular, heroic, grand for the community. They get the call, but they refuse the call for a time. And then they eventually embrace the call and they set out on a journey. And that journey, Campbell would call, and I would call, the midlife journey. Okay. This is the person who's going to, well, let me make a couple of designations. The hero, this is from the dictionary. The hero, quote, is a person who is admired or idealized for their courage. Mostly are outwardly driven and seeking validation from the world and trying to accumulate as much success as possible. Heroes are looking for ladders to climb and damsels to rescue and dragons to slay. Now, that's fine for the first 40 years. But what's happening in our culture is 50-year-olds, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds are still trying to live the hero's journey. Okay? Now, one of my main mentors and teachers, though dead, he has been for a long time, is Carl Jung. Carl Jung says, quote, "The first half of life is devoted to forming a healthy ego. The second half of life is going inward and letting go of it." Now, that is the focus of this presentation. First half of life, you develop a healthy ego. In elderhood, the ego is gradually demolished. And in place of ego, we want to replace ego with soul. Now, most men in this country and your country do not have a lot of elder models for how to transform ego into soul. I was very, very lucky. I was extremely blessed to have 3 older men in my life when I was in my 30s and 40s and 50s to help me in a way that I just can't even explain how glad and grateful I am. The second favorite quote of mine of Carl Jung's is, he says, "Life really begins at 40. Up until then, we're just doing research." Okay? Up until then, we're just doing research. Now, I'm going to open about 4 windows for you tonight, if I have enough time. Steve, what is the time frame that you told the men for this? Unmute yourself.
Yeah, Christmas, John.
I'm sorry, what?
Christmas time, anytime,
Oh,
whenever you're the elder
okay.
speaking. I'm not going to say, "Oh, John, sorry, that's your time." What do you think? I'm nuts. And mate, when you stop, if these guys just fall asleep or wander off, that's okay. I'll be here. I'm listening
Yeah.
to it. So anytime, mate. And in all honesty, uh,
Yeah.
anytime. It really.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No
Okay.
hard finish for me.
Okay. Okay. Great.
Sorry,
Great.
guys.
Great. Great. All right. So I'm going to open 4 windows for you to look out. I'm going to raise these 4 windows for you to look out into elderhood as I am beginning to understand it and beginning to write about it. I've done about 3 or 4 webinars so far around the country on this, and but know that I'm still fleshing everything out. The first window that I'm going to open for you into elderhood is the window from the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey. This is a mythological tale of Odysseus, and some of you may have read it. Some of you may know this allegory. Odysseus was a warrior. You remember Steve saying, there was a big part of us men in the 30s, in our 30s and 40s, that were needing to cultivate the warrior energy in us. That Robert Moore did such a great job. If you don't know his book, please look into it at some point. Robert Moore's book, Hero, sorry, King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover. King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover. Odysseus is the quintessential hero. He was the one that came up with the idea of the Trojan horse and the Trojan War and led his army to victory. But later, he goes on after that and he tries to go home. Now, I want you to listen. I'm going to emphasize certain phrases here tonight. He's finished with war, but he's not finished with his adventures yet. He's a seaman. He's been a seaman all his life. He's lived and worked and fought on the sea and on land, but he knows the sea. And so he gets in his boat with his crew, and he goes to these various places to fight the Cyclops, to meet the sirens, all these adventures home. But for 10 years, he struggles and cannot make it to his home. Now, the reason why I'm telling this is because in the end of the story, he is finally able to get home, and we're going to call him a man around his 40s or 50s. And he's home and he's restless. He's home and he's restless. Some of you men, in your struggles, you may be restless and you're trying to find home. I know I am still trying to find home. There's an ancient Chinese proverb that says, all sickness is homesickness. All sickness is homesickness. We have this ancient primitive urge to find home. He does get home back to Ithaca, and for a few years he's okay, but he gets bored and he gets restless. And one night he goes and sits underneath a tree and has a dream. And in this dream, the blind seer Tiresias comes to him and says, you are to take one last journey. One last journey. And Odysseus thinks, great, I get to go back on the sea. I get to go with my crew. I get back on my boat. I get to sail into foreign lands. I get to have other adventures like I had in the old days. And Tiresias says, oh, no, you don't. Oh, no, you don't. Matter of fact, it's nothing like what you've done in the past. What you're to do is to take your well-crafted oar, his oar that he used to row the ship all those years, you're to take that well-crafted oar and walk inland by yourself. Nobody, none of your crew is going to go with you. They're not interested in going where you're going. You're going to walk inland so far that you will know you have arrived when you get to a place where the people have never heard of the sea and never tasted salt, and a stranger is going to meet you and say to you, why do you have that winnowing fan on? Most people, unless you're rural or agrarial, which most of you are not, I was for a time, a winnowing fan looks very much like an oar. But a winnowing fan is what is used on farms to separate the wheat from the chaff. That's the elder's duty. That's the elder's duty right there in a nutshell, to separate the wheat from the chaff and to help younger men be able to learn how to do that as they go through their life and get to middle age and then get to on into elderhood. So you are to take nothing with you.
You still there, Steve?
Yeah, we're still here. It looks like John's, from what I can see, has got some red bars there. So we'll just see if he comes back online. Always the unfortunate thing with the other side of the world, right? I'll just wait and see. I can message him on Messenger, but hey. Oh well, that's probably good. If he's dropped, then he might rejoin.
You might want to stop recording.
Thank you, Lee. I'll have to edit that now too.
So,
go ahead, John. There you go.
so guys, can you hear me okay? You know, one of the things that is troublesome to me, even though I've gotten much better at it, you know, for 30 something years, I used to do this stuff in person, you know, at workshops and out in the woods and in conference centers. And so when you're doing it in person, you can get a feel of the energy and you can get a feel if people are getting stuff. And on screen, it's very, very hard to make up for the loss of that.
Yes.
So at any time, if I'm going too fast or not explaining something well enough, be sure and raise your hand and click on and ask, you know, just unmute yourself and say, John, go over that again. I didn't quite get that, or I don't understand. And that'll make for the presentation a lot better, hopefully for all of us.
Yeah.
Everybody with me so far about the story?
Yes, John. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now again, I want you to hear this well-crafted oar is being turned into a I lost the word for it.
Winnowing
Scythe.
fan.
Winnowing fan. Thank you. That's what happens when you get old. You know, you get to start remembering. You know, I get most of my exercise going from one room to the other, trying to remember what it was that I went in there for. I get like my 10,000 steps just doing that shit, you know, back and forth, back and forth. Anyway, so the winnowing fan. So he's there, and in the dream, Tiresias the blind seer says, you will plant that ore in the ground, and the stranger will help you, because when you plant your ore in the ground, after having made this solitary journey, leaving behind home, leaving behind a career, some of you guys were talking about retiring and what's next after that. Plant your well-crafted ore into the ground. And then Tiresias says, then you have to do 3 sacrifices. You have to sacrifice a ox, a sheep, and a wild boar. And the stranger at this new land says, I'll go down to the community and bring back the ram and the bull, but you've got to go out into the woods and catch the wild boar, and you cannot use any of your heroic tools. Now listen to that again. You cannot use any tools that you've known in the past to capture this wild boar. And the stranger says, but I will give you a little rope. That's the only thing you can take with you. So Odysseus goes out into the forest, finds the wild boar, tries to put a little rope on it, and it breaks. And he's got to figure out how to get that wild boar back to the place where those 3 sacrifices have to take place. Now, he has nothing except, it's one of the most fascinating pieces in the story to me. How do you think he gets the wild boar to come back to the place where the sacrifices are to be? You'll never think of it. I would have never thought of it. If I hadn't have read it, I wouldn't have known. He sings a song, and the wild boar follows him to the sacrifice. The sacrifice is made. The 3 are killed. He says goodbye to the stranger. And after he leaves, the well-crafted ore, now the winnowing fan, turns into a tree with fruit. An elder is a tree planted in the earth that will turn into fruit for the young people around them. If we do not turn into fruit for the young people around us, we are failing as elders. We are failing as elders. He gets to go back home finally. He's a successful king. He's a successful husband. He's a successful father. He is a successful elder, which is nothing like being a successful hero. That's the short version. If you want the long version, buy a book called Old Age by Helen Luke. She's got a very extensive version of that story. Old Age by Helen Luke. Now, questions or comments, thoughts before I open another window? Hopefully this window is kind of cleared. You can see out it. Questions, comments? Anybody raise your hand and speak?
I can totally relate to even from a work perspective thing, I've been at my job for 25 years now, and I can see, the new people coming through and all the conditions and stuff we have be eroded by that sort of thing. And because there's no sort of elders there now that were there and held up those sort of traditions or conditions that we had, So
Mhm, mhm,
yeah, totally late. And elsewhere in life too.
mhm. Yeah. How many of you men have an older man that has mentored you? Raise your hand if you had that. Yeah, good, good, good. Most men do not have that.
But I'd
Most
say,
men
John, just
don't even have friends.
that would be as a result of really having to do the wound work of knowing you haven't got someone. So I've had to seek people out, even like yourself, right? So they weren't there, but it has been a blessing. I wanted, Phil, you had a question. I just wanted to,
Yeah.
you want to
Yeah, yeah. The question was,
comment? Yeah.
did you say that the elder has two roles? One as winnowing, separating wheat from chaff, and the other one is bearing fruit?
Yep. Wonderfully said, bud. You got it. You got it. You got it. See, I have 5 men 60 and under that I meet with every other Tuesday, just as a mentor or elder. And I set that up in large part because I was mentored and eldered for free. Now I still have to do sessions like Steve and some of y'all. I have to make my living therapy, but I have to give back in ways that I'm trying to talk about here today.
Mm.
All right, let me go on. Here's a little sliver of a window I'm going to open. One of the things that is failing in our society is we are living what is called in a horizontal society. A horizontal society. Pre-industrial revolution. We lived in what is called a vertical society. A vertical society. A horizontal society, which is what we have in America and y'all have in Australia, a horizontal society is the 16-year-old feels just as entitled to whatever as the 60-year-old. The 60-year-old feels they have the same entitlement as the 40-year-old. So it runs this way. Pre-industrial society, it ran this way. Now, here's the best example of a vertical society. Apprentice, journeyman, master. If you were a carpenter, pre-industrial, well, even I'd say until the 1990s and 2000s, there was still some elements of that in the crafts, not so much in the arts, but it used to be in the arts as well. You would apprentice to a master. You would become a journeyman after such and such period, and then you would become a master yourself. This would be a painter, a musician, a sculptor, a writer, but also a bricklayer, a carpenter, an electrician. There's still some of that. Do y'all have some of that in your country still left, where you would go in as an apprentice to an electrician or a carpenter? Yeah. It's basically gone in most other part of the culture. But that is a big loss. Now, people always get angry at me for what I'm about to say, and I'm not going to, I'm going to make it real clear that I'm not judging this. I'm just observing it and pointing it out. The 16-year-old son is dressed like the 50-year-old father. The 16-year-old daughter is dressed like the 45-year-old mother. Now, that's just an observation. I know y'all have seen it, correct? Correct? Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's this way. It's this way. Now, in traditional rural India, not so much urban India, but in rural and agrarian India, they have clearly a vertical society still intact. This is the 4 stages of a man's life. First stage is student stage. This starts around 5 to 8 years old and runs to about 20. Very often, if it's possible, that stage, the young man goes and lives with his guru and studies with his guru. The second stage goes from about 20 to 40, and it's called the householder stage. This is the person who does exactly what the word sounds like, creates a family, gets a job, brings income, builds a home, takes care of the children, and that is that stage. That goes from about 20 to 40. The third stage is what's called the forest dweller stage. This is about 50 to 60 to maybe 70. This person says, you know what, I'm pretty much done with the householding stage. I've done my work. I've paid my bills. I put my kids through school. And now I'm going to go out into the forest on these little journeys and excursions and stay at ashrams and meditation sites because I'm beginning my spiritual journey into true elderhood, which then goes into the 4th stage, which is known as the renunciate. This is the person whose only job is to pray and meditate and read the scriptures. These people know what time of life they're in. Most of you and I don't, right? So that's an example of a vertical society. I'm going to take a pause there and ask if there's questions or comments about anything said so far. Just unmute yourself and speak.
So what in the past decade or so, like when you observe what's changed, how did it change for the young to the, yeah.
I'm not sure, we have, I'm sure y'all do too, all these different generations. I'm the baby boomer generation, as several of you people are either are or close. I'm 73. And then we have the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. And what we've seen in the United States is sort of an entitlement. Do y'all see that in Australia as much? Young people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, is that you, Luke, saying that?
Yeah. And I've got stepkids where work must be paid entertainment.
Uh-huh. There you go.
And life must not have stress.
There you go. There you go.
And they're entitled to being funded by others.
There you go. That's a good way to say it. So the bottom line is, for me, is that if you don't know that you need to become an elder because you haven't been around, and I don't use this word very often, but I'm going to go ahead and use it now, an initiated male who is 40 or over. Now, I also want to make a caveat there. There are young men and women who can be elders in their 30s and maybe even younger, but it's hard to be an elder younger than 30. but there are these men and women, you know, here in America, we would call them old souls. Old souls, you know, they're 30 going on 90 in some ways. Okay. Other comments or questions before I open another little window?
John, I was just talking to the butcher yesterday, just in passing, because he was sweeping in the and I said, "Oh, you're doing all the big jobs," because he is the one of the master butchers up there, and it did take me back to when, like what you were saying, Leith, about when I was an apprentice boilermaker. The first thing I had to master before I could do anything was sweeping, because you had to sweep the factory from one end to the other. And my boss, who was he got kicked out of school at 15. He didn't even look at my credentials. He just told me, "I don't need to look at your school certificate. I'll know if you're any good in a week," right? Alan knows I'm not a very good boilermaker. I'm just looking at him. But I had to learn to sweep. I had to learn to sweep without putting dust in the air, which I thought I thought that was insane. I thought this guy's lost his mind, right? That to sweep a whole factory from one end to the other without dust going up. But I learned to do it, because that was the job. You learned to, and I think, sometimes you can spend a week or two just cutting 6-inch bits of steel. Like you had to, and I think like I watch that now, that level of entitlement now, where that wouldn't. I don't know if kids have got the patience to be able to just sit there.
No, that's true.
And, yeah,
the attention.
Yeah,
the attention span is
and
so
to
short.
accept the instruction that's the job. Once you learn to do that, we might teach you something else if you're lucky. It's that, and that's the entry point. Not that you're not special. You're an apprentice, and after you do that, you can go get all our lunches. That sort of just you earn your way forward, right? Where now,
when the guy said, "When did it start?" I'm not a technology basher. I just don't believe in doing that. But the immediate gratification, you cannot become an apprentice if immediate gratification is your sole aim. Mark, what are you going to say something?
Oh, just that would be classed as some form of abuse or some kind of workplace bullying or something these days. Yeah.
Yep. I had to go to work at 12. I was working and making my money at 12 years old. I worked in my dad's machine shop every afternoon after school, on Saturdays, sometimes on Sundays. And then in the summer, I would get 1 week paid vacation. And the rest of the time I was working 40, 50 hours a week till I was 17. Now, I hated that son of a bitch for that. There's no question about it. But it did something to me that allowed me to become disciplined in areas that was hard for me as a flying boy to be. Let me open this next window. So we've used mythology. I want to continue using mythology a little bit and philosophy to talk about this stage of elderhood. In Plato's book, The Republic, Book 5 of the Republic, he talks about the allegory of the cave. Some of you may have got exposed to class, most people didn't, because it's not something easy to talk about. But I'm going to talk about it briefly, again, as a window into elderhood. Plato says in the Republic that human beings, exist in a cave. We live in a cave. And in this cave, we are chained to the floor. We're chained to the floor. And we can only look this way and forward, one direction. We cannot turn to the side, to the right side, and we certainly cannot turn around and look at what's behind us. Now listen to this. When I say this, one of the problems in some of this work that Robert Bly and Robert Moore and Michael Meade is that we don't think symbolically and metaphorically. In the United States, we're rationalists, we're reasonable, we're logical, we're in our heads, and myth and symbol is not readily accessible. So I'm going to say it again. We're in a cave and we're chained to the floor and we can't decide. We're all looking this way. Now, folks, this way is, oh, we're getting a sign saying internet connection is unstable. Okay.
It did just stop for a bit, Danny.
Oh.
Only a second, John, but it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me continue. So what we're seeing in this cave is a giant screen. The cave wall serves as a giant screen. And outside the mouth of the cave is a brilliant fire burning. And things are going across the mouth of the cave, and it's casting a shadow onto the cave wall. And we think that shadow is reality. We think that horse that we're seeing on the cave wall is the real thing. And we're all in agreement that that is reality. And that's the first half of life. That's the first 40 years. That's societal and political and industrial indoctrination. We're all seeing one, and we're calling that reality. And guess what? Finally, one hero, man or woman, one hero somehow figures out a way to break their chains, and they crawl out the cave, and they're immediately blinded by the fire and the sun, and then they see that what is outside of the cave entrance is reality. Okay? So just like Joseph Campbell talks about the hero's journey, he doesn't talk about what happens after the journey. And Plato does talk about what happens after the hero comes out. But then, because he's a hero, guess what he's going to do next? He's going to go back into the cave and try to tell the people that what they're seeing are illusions and not reality. How are the people going to react? Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Mandela. Okay. Here's why I use the story. There's no elder outside the cave to tell him to do what? If you're going to go back in the cave, you got to be very careful with how you bring forth your truth. Any of you remember as a young man trying to bring forth your truth and it didn't work out so well? See? That was one thing that, my friend and elder and mentor and buddy, Robert Bly, he would tell me how to talk, especially to my wife, in ways that I would never have learned otherwise. Right? So this hero goes back into the cave, tells everybody they're seeing illusions and not reality, and they kill him. and they kill him. Had he had an elder to tell him how and what to say and not say, he might. Questions or comments about that allegory? Anything want to be said there?
I just
Remember,
it
go ahead.
feels it feels very big, John, like what you're saying there, and I wonder, like, you know how, like, you were asking Stave, isn't it? Yeah, about the what changed, like, at the moment with the way, say, social media and social commentary is so immediate. Someone puts something on Twitter and next thing you know, there's 20,000 comments and they're cancelled or their whole life changes, and people can say something without consequence. I think Mike Tyson sort of famously said that, you know, that there's some quote of his about there's not enough people getting punched in the face or something, you know, along those lines of, once upon a time, if you said something in real time, you get it was filtered by the threat of being punched in the face, right? And now people are just saying anything and throwing it out there real fast. And I wonder, like you're saying, you get killed now, sort of cyberly. People have got to move towns and change their names, stuff like that, right? So it does actually catastrophically, you can get targeted. Where not only aren't you being guided anymore, but it seems like it's pretty. I think, and we talked, like, years ago, we looked at being passive as men, and I know sometimes seeing that silences me more now. I'm always admiring people that have got the courage to. There's some commentators out there that take that stuff on and really have a point of view, and it's critical, and people criticize them, but they're up for the argument. And I think that maybe out of this new world, people are getting better at arguing, but maybe not every man, you know, because we are underfathered. And that thing that, like I was seeing last night, and this is not a good example, I suppose, but they were showing Mick Jagger preparing for their concerts at 82, right? And he still looks fantastic. He's doing all these Mick Jagger moves, and I suppose he's not a great example of that, but I suppose it is a bit of a picture of society does want everyone to live forever the way they were. And there's not a lot of acceptance or entry points into taking the ore inland. You know what I mean? Like, for folks, like if Mick quit the band, everyone would think he'd be mad. What's wrong with you? You know, I think people want him to die on stage or something. Still looking great, you know, make a good looking corpse. So they're all the rummaging thoughts, and it's not really coherent, you know.
Well, bottom line for me is, I have had the experience of being with elders, and I know that it's incumbent upon me to try in my own way to make this argument that if we don't bring this into our countries and into our lives, into our families, that we're doomed. You know, in all indigenous cultures, the elder is revered. And in our culture, they barely even exist if they're revered at all. Here's your third window. Arthur Miller wrote a play that came out in 1949 on Broadway. The play was called Death of a Salesman. Did anybody see it? In 1949, it was the great actor, which most of y'all probably won't remember, American actor named Lee J. Cobb. He played the lead role of Willie Loman, who was a salesman. Okay, that was his livelihood. That's the focus of the play. He was a salesman. Later on in the 80s, and you can rent this if you ever want to see it. It's one of the greatest plays, and it's one of the greatest plays that talks about the lack of elders and the continuation of the heroic journey of anything that I've ever seen or pulled together. Dustin Hoffman played the lead role in the mid 1980s. Willie Loman is a 63-year-old man in the play. And everybody in the play, all the other characters, call him the kid. The kid. He's 63, and all he wants is to be a successful salesman, and he's not even close to being that. He will not grow up. He will not grow old. He wants to convince himself and all the people around him that he's still vital, that he's still got it. And the sad part is he's never been vital and he's never had it. But he makes up stories in his mind and he shares those stories, but turns out those stories are just not true. All right, so what happens? First of all, he has an affair. This is the quintessential stereotypical midlife male story who has an affair to try to keep the youth blood flowing. He cheats on his wife and he wants to always be young. And he has two sons, Biff and Happy. Biff and Happy. And he wants them to be a success, and they're as much of a failure as he is. Biff is in his 30s, Happy is in his early 40s, and they can't grow up. The story is finally going to result in him thinking about committing suicide because he believes that the insurance policy will benefit his family in ways that he could not. And in the play, they find a rubber hose that he had hidden where he goes down to the basement periodically to try to get up the courage to commit suicide. Finally, after the truth about his life comes out in the play, he goes out at night and he takes packets of seeds and he starts planting seeds in his backyard. And he says in the play, a man should have something in the ground, and I have nothing in the ground. Now you hear how that connects to the well-crafted ore, put in the ground. See, we use this word, we've been using this word for some time now. He's not very grounded, we'll say, or she's not very well grounded, we'll say. One of the phrases that used to be said in America was, he was a sober-minded man. Willie Loman was not a sober-minded man, and he was not grounded. Elderhood is about being grounded in truth, being grounded in reality, being grounded in ways that we just don't see many people today. That's the little window there. Any questions or comments about that little brief description of the play?
You just hit the nail on the head. My father died in 2019, and it's just interesting. A couple of elder people who stood it didn't fill his shoes, but knew how much I adored my dad and how much influence he had on me. And it's interesting that one guy's just turning 80, and it's exactly like in my head what I was thinking about him as my elder. He'd there's no bullshit. He'll talk about the struggles with his wife. He'll talk about the struggles with himself, but the facade isn't there, and it's always like truth's the real language now. It's not. I think, yeah, it just gets to a point where I don't need to impress you, Dave, with my answers or anything like that. I'll deliver what I really think is the truth. So.
And that fits, and you were saying, Dave, that fits into this older man, right? That's the evidence of his groundedness, right?
Yeah.
There's no, he's just speaking straight to you.
Yeah,
Yeah, I hear you. That's good.
that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, the last window I'm going to open for you is what I'm calling the psychology of subtraction. As elders, as people moving into elderhood, there needs to be a lot of subtraction. In our culture here in America, we're a people of acquisition and accumulation. We have storage units to store our stuff that we've accumulated and acquired and are too resistant, maybe too afraid to clear out. Elderhood is about clearing out the clutter, not just what's in our storage units, but what's inside us. See, there's a lot of clutter that we accumulate inside us in those first 40 years. The clutter such as addictions that you guys have talked about, the clutter of overemphasis on materialism, the clutter of being overly wanting praise and adulation. Elderhood is about clearing out the clutter. I've accumulated a number of habits, and I've started clearing out quite a few of them. Now, this is just me as an example. I have not watched the news in over 100 days for the first time in my adult life. I would watch the news in the evening, and I'd watch the news in the morning. And I decided that it was clutter. It was negative, scary, sad usage of my time. At 73, I need to clear out the clutter. My second is I'm emptying this house of all my possessions, except for maybe I have like 3,000 books here. I'm giving them all away, I'm not moving them anywhere. I'm not going to try to take them with me. After 40 years of 3,000, 4,000 books, they're clutter. So I got inside clutter I got to get rid of. I got outside clutter I got to get rid of, because in order to go into the next stage of my life, which if I wanted to use the Hindu term, the Indian term, the renunciation, if I have all this clutter, I cannot focus on the spiritual stuff that I need to do to make the passing into the final days of my winter life. That's just me. That's just me. What clutter, what do you need to subtract that will help you strip away the superficial layers so that you can see the deeper hidden essences of your life, the mysterious parts of your life that being in the first 40 years, you did not have time to look at nor cherish because you were like me, just trying to make a living, trying to earn money, trying to pay your bills, trying to pay your mortgage. And now you've got to start removing stuff. Here's what Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, says, quote, "We shape clay into a pot, but it is the we want." He goes on to say, to attain knowledge.
John, you dropped out for a sec. Can you repeat
Okay.
the quote?
Okay. This is from Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. And then he goes on to say, to attain knowledge, add things every day. To attain wisdom, subtract things every day. So I came up with this idea that I'm calling psychology of subtraction. What do you need to subtract in order to go into elderhood for those of you close to it? And for those younger, what do you need to start thinking about subtracting? What do you need to start thinking about eliminating some of the heroicism? See, the word that I like to use with my clients is, what are you still trying to do heroically? Heroically. You're 50 years old. What are you trying to still do heroically? You're 60 years old. What are you still trying to do heroically? You're 70. What are you still trying to do heroically? How are you thinking heroically? How are you behaving heroically? And when are you going to move out of the hero into elder and move from ego to soul? Now I'll take questions with whatever time we got, and anything else that you want to ask, even if it's not about what I've so poorly presented tonight.
I've got a question.
Okay.
In the latter end, and for those who are addicts know that step 12 is giving back. How do you know that you're doing a true step 12 and helping others, as opposed to calling that a heroic act?
You ask them. You ask them what they need, as opposed to assume you already know. See, one of the worst rules, and some of you are going to find this kind of upsetting. The golden rule is one of the worst rules that's ever been created for certain contexts. For certain contexts. The golden rule works very well for business, but the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, that is a failing rule for real connection, real intimacy, and real love. The better rule is what I call the platinum rule. Do unto others the way they have been longing for perhaps their entire life. See, when I was a young man, one of the things that I did was I tried to give people and show people love the way I wanted to be shown. Then I realized that I need to ask these people, my loved ones, my family, my sponsees, how do you want me to give to you? What do you need from me? Not this is what you need from me. Because I don't know. I don't know. You and I are different. So the answer that I have to that question for a while now has been ask. A lot of people love their sons and daughters like they themselves would like to be loved. Ask them how they'd like to be loved, and then listen. Same thing with your sponsees. What do you need from me at this stage of your life? What do you have that is missing that maybe I can provide for you? Teaching, money, support, love, companionship. But it goes, the Rumi, the 13th century Persian poet, he said, if you want to have a good conversation with someone, ask them a question and then listen.
Mhm.
Somebody else,
Yeah,
anything?
Phil got one in the room, Phil.
Yeah,
Okay.
one observation and two questions.
Okay.
The observation was that in terms of subtracting, Dallas Willard said in response to a question, I'm practicing the discipline of not having the last word. And I think that's a wonderful thing to give up.
Mhm.
And I've sort of adopted that. I'm practicing the discipline of not being precise. So I don't pull out my phone and check anymore.
Mhm.
And one of us can be wrong, and that's okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Two questions. From window number, I'm not sure which window it is, but what are the implications of a generation of entitled individuals? You said it's sort of it's been since pre-industrial revolution, since we've been stratified or vertical. It feels new to me. And what's going to be required of elders to address this problem?
Well, one of the things I gave a webinar several weeks ago about some of this same material, and I got several emails from young men saying they would like to serve as apprentice in men's work, that they want me to, take them on as apprentices. Now, I'm talking about 30-year-old men, 2 or 3 30-year-olds, 35, one was 37, one was 40. And after the talk, they just said, there's something to this, and will you do this? And so I wrote back and I said, yeah, I mean, you've asked, and I'll figure out how to do this. Now everybody's on the screen got to remember this. I'm an elder in training. I'm not a master elder by any means. Robert Bly was, and my friend Bill Stott and Dan Jones. But that is a piece, and I really applaud what you're subtracting too, by the way. So, there's some talk, maybe about me trying to figure a better way to convey this material so that this idea, like you guys right there in Australia, you become the elders of your community. And even if you really don't know what you're doing, I mean, I've made my whole career based on not knowing what I was doing, and failing wonderfully well in the process. Other questions or comments? I'm beginning to run out of steam. It's getting kind of late here in the States, but I got a few minutes left.
One in the room here, Pete. Yeah. Oh, and then now, got two in the room. Go.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
when Steve and Mark and Al and I got to NA, like it was a young people's fellowship in age and in clean time. And now, 30 odd years later, we actually have these elders. And quite a lot of us, the biggest cohort in NA outside of 90 days is 20 plus years.
Right.
But I feel really isolated as an elder. I don't feel like we have a network of elders sort of to peership with.
Yes, support each other.
Ability of that role. So I think that's a niche that I don't know how to fix. But you talking today made me really aware of that. We have this eldership just through time, but we haven't got it really through experience yet.
Well, see, maybe create a council of elders. 2, 3, 4, where 2 or more are gathered in my name, create a council of elders that meets, periodically. Now, the thing that I'd like to encourage, especially you guys with lots of clean and sober time, is when you can draw in others outside of the 12-step community, that you not limit it to just that if you run into a young man or younger woman who want to benefit from your accrued wisdom, be sure and try to be open to that. A lot of the men that I work with are 12-step men, of course, but a lot are not, Somebody else was going to say something?
Yeah. A bit like what Pete was talking about, in the sense that when I got into recovery back in the 80s, I didn't really understand really what was going on, but in hindsight, I look back, and back then I was looking up people thinking that they'd been around for a long time, but in actual fact, NA had only been going probably 2 or 3 years in Australia. That it only just started, and I've kind of over the last, I'm about 35 years into recovery now, and as it's been spoken about, a lot of the time I've got to parent and kind of guide myself, because when you're trying to get, I go to many meetings and places, and there's no peers. I'm actually up there, and so and that's not how I want it, but it's just the reality. How things are these days. So I find that I have to learn how to parent myself, yet without ever being parented in the first place. So I never got the guidance that I needed as a child to learn any of the skills of manhood, and so right at the moment I'm in a situation of being an elder with no one to look up towards in my community in a physical sense. Like, sure, I could go, like talk to people like you, but I mean, in a physical sense, on a daily basis, there isn't any. And I find that quite difficult, having elders to look up to, So yeah, and right at the moment, the clutter thing on that other section is, for me, one of the things that I believe in and I'm practicing in my own life is the clutter of negative thinking. Negative thinking. My head loves the journey of just thinking negatively. Like, as you spoke about the news, I never listen to the news. But also, I don't want to listen to anyone that wants to go on about resentment and it just rubs me the wrong way. I just go,
I have to say, if I won't stay in a conversation at this stage in my life, I won't stay in a superficial bullshitting conversation longer than 15 minutes max. And if I can cut it sooner than that, if the conversation does not have some positive substance to it, I don't have the time for it in the way that I would have. I got 2 things to say before I end for the evening. One that is very important, and I hope you'll find useful. In order to become an elder, one of the things that I had to learn how to do was to stop sunning. Stop sunning. Stop thinking of myself as a son. Stop acting like a son. Stop talking like a son. Stop being talked to like a son. And stop sunning the women that I loved. In my case, my father is still alive at 96, mom at 94. I had to stop sunning them. This is something that I learned, believe it or not, Steve, in Australia. I was on tour with some very, very incredible people, and one man he was probably 70, 75 on the time, Dr. Cruz was on this tour. And I said to him, I took him aside one time and I said, I was like 38 years old. and had been teaching at the university and then on tour with these incredible people who knew what they were doing. And I just said to him, Dr. Cruz, every time I get around my father, we have these clashes and conflicts and arguments. And I said, it's just driving me crazy. I don't know what to do about it. And this very, very wise elder said, John, stop being a son. I said, but I am a son. What the hell do you mean stop being a son? When you get around your dad, you talk like a son, act like a son, think like a son, and he thinks and talks and acts like a father. So stop sonning him. And at 38, that was a beginning, huge step towards moving into midlife and going towards elderhood. Now, with that said, I'm going to close with a poem by Rilke, German poet, 19th century German poet, that I think this particular poem has relevance to what we've been saying tonight. It goes like this. Sometimes during supper, a man stands up and walks outdoors and keeps on walking because of a church that stands somewhere in the east. And his children say blessings on him as if he were dead, while other men stay inside with the dishes and the glasses, and they die there. And they force their children to go far out into the world to find that same church which he forgot. Sometimes a man stands up during supper and walks outdoors. This is the forest dweller. This is the renunciate who says, I've done my part as a heroic father man. Sometimes a man stands up, walks outdoors, and keeps on walking because of the church. Something spiritual is calling. And his children bless him for doing so, while other men stay inside with the dishes and the glasses and dies there, and forces his children to go far out into the world to find that same church which he forgot.
Mm-hmm.
That's the job of the elder, to stand up, walk outdoors, keep on walking, to find that spiritual something. And if he does that, his children benefit from it because they will see that model and they will know when it's time for them to stand up during supper and walk outdoors. And other men, like my dad, will stay inside the house with the dishes and the little whiskey glasses, and he will die there, and he will force somebody like me to go far out into the world to find that same church which he forgot.